Hey, it's Amethyst Virgos. This is going to be a brief video, but this topic is going to be about emotions for the unemotional person. And are you an unemotional person? One thing I do want to share as a disclaimer is that we all have emotions. And so really what my hope is with this is to really talk through how I had to come with reckoning that I have emotions. So here's what I mean. We all have emotions. I tend to show mine more in private. I have a Scorpio IC on the 4th house cusp. So I'm very private and internalize a lot of my emotions. But I have a really active 4th house. So emotions and feeling and, listening and learning to navigate how I feel and how I feel in regards to people I'm close to, and all those different emotional connections are really there in my 4th house. So I do resonate with my 4th house. But for those of us who grew up thinking we weren't emotional, so when you don't openly show emotions, people don't treat you like you have emotions, or people don't treat you as very delicate, right? Especially if you're a person who appears to always kind of have it together. And so if you are perhaps even a Virgo rising or an earth sign person, right? Your default mode, if you're an earth rising or an earth sun, perhaps, or even an earth moon, like your default is not to show emotion. It is to do something. If I feel a way, I'm going to do something about it typically. Or some people might have been raised to and seen that in your own life, where in your family, perhaps being overly emotional and talking about how you feel was not really done, or it wasn't seen as something that was important. And so I'm not complaining at all about my upbringing, because like I said, my upbringing, my mom did the best she could. She did a pretty good job considering the situation and the fact that my dad passed when I was younger. So that has an impact as well when you experience traumatic experiences as a child or when you're younger. And that does change your the way in which you express. So if you already were predisposed based on your chart or your demeanor to not be someone who's really showing emotion, you're more of a talker, you're more of a thinker, you're more of a doer, those situations sometimes can set you back. And then you're going to be, again, I don't want to go into a whole rising conversation, but as I've said with the rising is on the 1st house cusp. Because of that, the rising a part of your rising can be how you're perceived. I know a lot of people don't get down with that, but like, yes, it's on the 1st house cusp, but again, a lot of people are going through life doing certain things because there are certain pressures put on you because of how you are perceived. So yes, we can say that your rising, your sun is your consciousness and what you're consciously doing. And the rising can kind of have that. Sometimes astrologers and now in books will say like, oh, that approach, how is your approach to life, can be that rising. It's on the 1st house cusp. But we have to be careful because the rising's on the 1st house cusp, but a person also has a Mars sign, which is more of your fiery direction, your true conscious awareness of the actions that you are doing is your Mars. So I want us to be careful because we have some conflicting things going on here. Point being, there's many dynamics of all of these placements. My main point is saying, if you appear to other people in any way to be someone who is more stoic, or you're calm. It's like, I used to always get this, and I don't know if people thought it was a compliment. Oh, you're so calm. And it's like, it's interesting because it's like inside my mind is never calm, right? It's never calm. And I think with people I'm close to, I show more of that storm a little bit more. But then, we also have to understand the fact that you're going to sometimes be perceived as being able to handle certain things when you don't show your emotions. And sometimes it is important to talk about how you feel. And it's going to shock people who aren't used to dealing with your feelings. And people who have Chiron, if you have Chiron in any of the water signs, you have got, or their water houses, you got to figure it out because it can be blocking other areas of your life. You have Saturn square Chiron. Whoa, there's probably some issue with, a parental figure perhaps as well. Because sometimes you're meant to do great things, but if you have aspects to your chart that are making them difficult, that is why when we interpret charts, we have to understand, you don't just look at the one placement. Now you can if you're starting out, but what happens a lot is people read these things online and they're, but wait, my life is supposed to be amazing. What's going on? It's supposed to be great. It's like, well, you need to find someone to interpret that because you didn't even realize you have 4 squares to Chiron. That's important to you. You know, if you, I don't have, yeah, my Chiron, I'm thinking of the degrees too. As far as my Chiron is also conjunct my Pallas. That helps a little bit. But my Chiron is not an emotional healing thing. You see what I'm saying? Like mine's in Gemini, and so it's a bit different. So my birth chart helped me become aware of the important ways to view our emotions, our feeling. There's so many different ways. The water sign of the 8th house, or the sign of Scorpio, or the 8th house symbolically is the intense emotions. You might have to unpack some trauma. You might have to unpack what you really feel deep within. You might have to unpack things that you're holding on to and ask yourself, do I need to keep this? Through the 4th house, your emotional connections with other people, your ability to kind of be vulnerable with those that you need to be vulnerable with, listening to yourself, having intuition. When your emotions are all jumbled up, you can be blocking your own intuition, okay? And then the 12th house. Well, there we are dealing with our sensitivities. You have to, you don't view yourself, oh, you're not sensitive. You are. You have 12th house placements. You are sensitive, and you have to do something with that sensitivity. So a lot of people find they're giving back to other people, right? You instead of just being a martyr or being victim of having to feel down or feeling disconnected and feeling confused, you do something with that energy and say, well, if I have a layer of sensitivity, no matter what placement's there, if I'm connected more to humanity, if I'm connected more to others through a spiritual way, maybe I can do something with that, whether it's talking to people about spirituality, whether it's doing some type of spiritual practice, whatever the case may be. So spirituality, we think of, there's so many buckets. People, I've said this before in videos, in our society, a lot of people, especially women, you have probably completely ignored your intuition because we are in a very literal society. We are in a very physical world. We are in a 3D world. We touch this, we touch that, we see it. Everything's about, well, I can't see it, so it's not true, is that type of energy that we have. So it's very important for us to understand what it is that we're actually trying to experience, because we don't need to be limited just by the physical world. Now, we have to live in the physical world, if you're here, right? So you have to pay your bills. You have to find a place to live. You have to find ways to provide for your family and things of that nature. But what we also have to understand is the fact there's different ways to deal with feelings. There is sensing. If you sense something, a little bit different than intuition. Sensing is when you get like universal messages. When you just know something that's more part of a collective consciousness. You might be the messenger. You're the person meant to tell everybody something that can help us all be inspired, right? So that's more of the 12th house, right? The 4th house is more, remember, 4th house is real. We see it. It's where you come from. It can be your hometown. It's not just the emotions, but the 4th house is the mother, it's roots, it's all those things, the starting point, basically. And so what you'll see here is like, well, that's the intuition. You get intuition sometimes based on your environment, right? My intuition is very interesting, where I can pick up on things and don't know why, but also the minute I get a detail, everything just starts spinning. So I'm I'm a very analytical person. And so even spiritually, I have to break things down to myself first as well. So like, I'm a details person. Like, give me one detail, all of a sudden I get an influx of intuition. But I still obviously can have the basic instinctual intuition. You sense something's off. That person seems a little off. I don't really know if I like them. Or you get a good vibe from something or someone. Like, that's very basic intuition. So my point that I'm trying to make is, blocking your emotions. Oh, I'm a savage. I don't have emotions. That's not true. You do. And some people who say those things have unresolved issues. And again, sometimes even men think, oh, well, I don't need to be emotional. I do personally. I'm going to just tell you. Personally, I don't. Now, unless it's a small child, unless it's my child or something like that, I don't think crying about everything is going to fix things. And maybe that's just me being earthy. It's about like, what are we going to do? Okay, we cried it out today. What are we doing tomorrow, right? Again, unless someone's going through trauma or loss or grieving, that's a whole different situation. But my point is like, it is important to acknowledge your feelings, to acknowledge your emotions, whether you're a man or a woman. It really doesn't matter. Because as a man, it can help you have better relationships with your family, with your children, with your partners, to acknowledge this part of yourself or ways in which you need to heal. It doesn't, the thing that I was trying to say is I don't feel comfortable when people are just crying out of nowhere. And it's not because I don't, and it's not that you're wrong, it's I don't operate that way. And that's what I also want us to understand about astrology. When people have to understand, you don't like certain signs because of where does it show up in your chart. You see what I'm saying? In your chart, you might express your emotions through your joy, through fifth house. Maybe you're someone that expresses your emotions are channeled into your joy and into your creativity, perhaps. And that's why you can't relate to someone maybe with Cancer on the first house cusp who is more expressive, right? And it doesn't mean that's always about crying. It just means acknowledging your own feelings. I want us to understand that emotions are not just about crying. You know, people say, oh, you know, and again, that's why it's always disrespected. Oh, women are crying and there's the emotions. It's like, wait a minute, you can be emotionally intelligent. I've seen people be emotionally intelligent and get very far in life because they understand what motivates people. They understand what makes people happy. That's a part of emotions. And I think we need to broaden the definition of emotions, just like we broaden the definition of anger or emotion. Wait, anger is an emotion. But because, you know, people don't feel powerful when they're being angry, they don't want to say, no, if you're angry all the time, if you are blowing up, if you're harassing and if you're assaulting people and you're just, that is emotion. There's something within you that is just coming out, and that's an emotion. You know, and so that's why I think it's important to have positive understandings of your own moods. How are you feeling? Why do you feel that way? Is there something that can make you feel better? Is it going to, you know, there's so many different ways in which we can acknowledge that emotions and feelings and water energy is important, whether you view yourself emotional or not. And by doing that, you're actually going to notice you have better relationships with other people. Share how you feel. You know, you don't have to keep working through. And it depends on how you say it. You can still say something in a very rational way, in a calm way, but it be about what you feel. Because what you feel can't be ignored. And if you keep feeling the same thing over and over again, that has to be addressed. And so what happens is we internalize everything. But like I said, you can fluctuate in mood. You can fluctuate in how you feel. But if something keeps returning to you, it can be positive. It tells you to be inspired. It tells you, go ahead, you do that, right? Maybe you're feeling a certain way and it's a positive reason. But if you're feeling a negative way and it keeps coming back to you and something makes you uncomfortable, something makes you feel depressed, something in a situation or a person or individual, you have to address that. And what I've said before is for the earthy person or the logical person, right? It's almost like, you know, Chicken Soup for the Soul, that book series. It's like emotions for the logical or the logical or earthy sign soul or something. I don't know. Like, it's like, you know, it's finding ways to still have emotions be a part of who you are. In our inner self, we all have a moon sign. That's where sometimes people can feel so unfulfilled in life. It's like they have these, look at their chart and look at their accomplishments, but they haven't tapped into their moon, especially maybe they've been told not to listen to themselves. No, don't listen to that. Do what everybody around you is pressuring you to do. That can be found a lot in especially men, perhaps. It's like if you're not encouraged to acknowledge, encourage that moon energy, and what does it mean for you? You are only expressing what the outer world is assuming you're going to do. And though we all have things we need to do in the world, we all have roles that we play within the world, it is important for all of us to dig deep to truly understand ourselves. And understand, if you're not an emotional person, crying is not the only way to acknowledge your emotions. And I think that society always wants to call it something to downplay, I guess I'm trying to say, to downplay the role of emotions in our lives. It's always a way to, you know, see it's uncontrollable, it's hysterical. It's like the old back in the day, stereotypes of women being hysterical and, oh my gosh, it's that. It's like, but actually there's different ways. And you also have to practice acknowledging other people's feelings. And we also can't tell someone else how to feel. And I think that's the hardest part for people who aren't working by default through emotions. Even if I am spiritual, right? And I know that I'm not gonna, you guys are on my channel, you already know what I am. By default, I'm not, like, to me, my intuition is a little bit separate from emotions, meaning like I'm not by default functioning every day of emotions. I'm thriving off wake up, let me get this done, let me get that done, let me get this done, including, you know, the work that I do, content creating, doing readings and things like that. Now for readings, obviously I have to be in the right zone, the right spiritual mood to do that. But if we're not by default, so even when we unpack all of our emotions, some of us are still not by default emotional people on the outside, but we are on the inside, or we have to learn. I didn't say this before, but I said in a comment to somebody, I've learned from Cancer people. I have Venus in Cancer, but it's very disconnected because my Cancer energy is on the cusp of my 11th house. So it does influence like who I'm around or the networks that I'm belong to, organizations or friendships, things like that. I'm very female-centered type of, I guess, social community that I've experienced throughout my life, whether it was college, work, etc. And obviously I do have like male friends and I've had male acquaintances before, you know, but the female one has always been the, you know, kind of the center of that. And, you know, so Venus is there in my 11th house in Cancer, 25th degree, but I didn't really step into or feel my Venus in Cancer energy until I became a mother. So that's an aside, but what I'm really trying to say is like, I've learned from Cancer people that I'm close to or that I have to deal with or that I have a friendship with or people that I've just an acquaintanceship with, but I know what their sign is. I had to learn how to see how they process things to really help them, or also see what I need to do as well. Like, it's not wrong if that person is responding that way. That's their DNA. That's how they are going to deal with situations. It's not to just talk it out. It's, I feel this has to come out. It's cardinal energy. So I've actually learned from Cancer people how to do that and how to tap into that. So that's the thing about astrology. You're learning from people. Instead of sitting online, making memes, bashing your ex who was a Leo or something like that, instead of doing that very low vibrational work, the real work is learning why someone is the way they are and dealing with it. Especially if it's somebody worth having in your life, right? You know, we're not talking about your mortal enemy. We're not talking about somebody that scammed you. We're talking about people who actually matter to you. And you can't just block them off because they're a Virgo or they're a Cancer or they're a Gemini or they're an Aries. Like, there's so much surface level stuff to, oh, they're an Aries. I tell everybody in my household has significant Aries energy. 2 Aries sun and an Aries rising. Like, help. No, I need a support group. No, I told you before, I don't have any Aries in my chart except for some asteroids. I don't have any Aries in my chart. So in any placement, now once we start diving, like I said, in asteroids, I do. So I could not sit here and just sit online mad all day about Aries. I had to learn the energy. I have to learn them. I have to understand them. I've learned what is good about Aries instead of the things in past life, in past experiences, I had really negative interactions with some people with that sign. Now I had positive as well, but there was a lot with that sign. So I could not sit here. And now there's certain Aries, I don't want to go into a diatribe, but there's certain Aries individuals with certain placements that I vibe with better. And there's some where it's like, oh, I see why I don't really get along with you or like you. But what I'm saying is I could not sit here online complaining all day. Do something about it. You got to get along with your Virgo sister. You got to get along with your Scorpio sister. You got to get along with your Gemini brother. You don't have to, but if you want to, understand the approach of that sign, understand what planet rules that sign, understand. So I don't want to go into that because that's a whole different video topic. But the main thing is, I don't want this more than 20 minutes, is we all have emotional placements. If you are someone who has 4th house, 8th house, 12th house placements, if your Chiron is in a water sign, if you are noticing there's certain themes popping up, maybe your midheaven is a water sign, but you don't think that you're very emotional. Well, maybe your work works with the emotions of other people. So we cannot dismiss emotions. We cannot dismiss water signs. We need that connectivity in our lives. You cannot flourish. You cannot have true, meaningful, deep bonds without water energy. And if your water energy is all jacked up or you don't acknowledge it, you're going to see problems emerge in your relationships and you're not going to feel like authentic bonds. Oh, you have fun with that person. Cool. But how are your intimate relationships? How are your romantic relationships? How is your family functioning with, so it's really important for us to acknowledge where the water is in our chart, what our own emotions are. Forget a chart for a second. Think about yourself and what it is you need to work through. And that's going to be something to help carry you forward in being emotionally competent, emotionally capable, and emotionally intelligent.